features of my old model, but added features that simplified it to such an extent that indeed the new model could be put directly into electronics. This new model was called CODI, C-O-D-I, CODI. At about this time, in the second half of 1996, I was contacted by an American electronic engineer. He had found my papers interesting and wanted to collaborate. I sent him details of my German assistant's new model and asked him if he thought he could implement it in hardware using special FPGAs that were then on the market. He said he thought he could. My Japanese boss approved the financing of the idea, and a close collaboration between my new American colleague and myself then started. Unfortunately, I lost my German colleague only after 1 year. He went to do a PhD in Europe. My Japanese boss reverted to his old policy of one person per project, and I became more miserable than ever. I was starting to want to leave, but couldn't, because the new machine had just been approved for construction. Relations with my group manager became increasingly strained, especially after I discovered he had a policy of putting his name on academic journal papers written by his subordinates, to which he made absolutely no intellectual contribution. He asked me to put his name on one of my journal articles. I refused and told him that in the West that would be considered disgusting, an abuse of power and corrupt. After that, relations soured fast. I was allowed to stay on until the end of the year 1999, and then I'd have to leave. The Japanese economy had performed so badly during the 90s, the lost decade, that the whole research division was considered too blue sky, too fringy to be funded in terms of economic scarcity. So I and most of my department left Japan at the turn of the millennium. I got another job. Ironically, it was in Brussels, and to do the same work as I had done in my Japanese lab. During the years 1996 until 2000, my hardware colleague in the US was working away solidly on constructing the special piece of hardware that would fulfill my dream of building artificial brains. It was so slow going for him. He had only a limited budget from my Japanese group boss. He could afford only one full-time assistant, plus a few part-timers on limited term contracts. During the course of his work, the US company making the FPGA chips that the machine was based on decided to take them off the market. My US colleague then had to fight the company to get the remaining chips. This caused many months of delay. The chips were finally obtained, but were untested. Thus he had to test them himself, without the thorough testing software that the company would have. More delays. It was not until mid-2000 that the machines that I called CAM brain machines, CBMs, CAM stands for Cellular Automata Machine, were finally debugged sufficiently that true evolution experiments could begin. CAM stands for Cellular Automata Machine because the original work was to put an artificial brain inside cellular automata. The first CBM was delivered to my Japanese lab in early 1999, but it still contained bugs. With untested chips and small manpower, work progressed slowly, but all was not gloomy. Other people became interested in the CBM. By early 2001, there were 4 such machines in the world. The first remained at my old Kyoto lab in Japan. The second was bought by a Belgian speech processing lab and later transferred to a bioinformatics company also in Belgium. The third was bought by my Brussels lab, and the fourth was owned by my hardware colleague. Thus, with 2 of the 4 machines in Belgium, Belgium became, in a sense, the world leader in this field. In 2000, I managed to get a $1 million grant from the Brussels government to build an artificial brain to control a small kitten-like robot, giving it hundreds of behaviors. As you can probably see, all this work from the 1990s was really only an extension of my old PhD thesis work of the 1980s. Just what could the CBM do? I believe it was truly a miraculous machine that, in time, once people appreciated its significance, would take its place in the history of computing. It implemented the CODI-CA-based neural net model directly in electronics. It evolved a neural net in a few seconds. That is, it performed a complete run of a genetic algorithm, that is, tens of thousands of neural net circuit module growths and fitness measurements. It could change the color of its CA cells at the phenomenal rate of about 130 billion with a B a second. It could handle nearly 100 million artificial neurons. It had the processing capacity of about 10,000 PCs, so it was definitely a supercomputer, but cost only $500,000. The CBM had 2 main roles. The first was to evolve individual neural circuit modules, or just modules, I call them. A neural net was grown/evolved inside a 3D CA space of 24 by 24 by 24 CA cells, or little cubes. About 1,000 neurons could fit inside this space. Branch-like axons and dendrites grew randomly inside this space. A programmed FPGA was used to measure the quality of the neural signaling of the network that was grown. The basic ideas were similar to what I was working on before, 1966. Once a module was evolved, it was downloaded into a gigabyte of RAM memory. 64,000 of such modules could be evolved, one at a time, each with its own fitness definition, that is, task or function, as specified by human evolutionary engineers, EEs, and downloaded into the RAM. Later, brain architects, that's BAs, interconnected the downloaded modules into software to form their humanly specified artificial brain architectures to perform the tasks that they wanted. After the bankruptcy of my Brussels lab in the dot-com crash and the move to my US university, Utah State University, I was forced to rethink. My hardware colleague lost $300,000 of his own money when my Brussels lab was unable to pay for the CBM it bought from him, making him wash his hands of the whole project. Since he had monopoly knowledge of the detailed architecture of the CBM, further work on its development came to a screaming halt. My American university could not afford $500,000 for a fifth CBM, so I was left without my machine. I spent 2.5 years learning how to teach, plus writing papers on evolvable hardware and quantum computing, until I realized that thanks to Moore's law, I could once again build brains, but this time far more cheaply. A British company had developed a way to translate ordinary computer software code, for example in the computer language C, into bit-string instructions to wire up, that is, configure programmable chips, FPGAs. I conceived a new brain-building research project. The new project was to use a GA to evolve neural nets that would be programmed into the FPGA electronic board, costing less than $1,000. This board could evolve a neural net circuit module dozens of times faster than a PC could in software, the latter taking hours to several days per module. These modules would be evolved one by one in the hardware and the result downloaded into a PC. Each module would have its own evolved function as specified by human BAs, brain architects. Once several tens of thousands of these modules had been so downloaded into the PC, special software could be used to specify the connections between the modules. For example, the output of module M3728 could be connected to the second input of module M9356. The PC is then used to perform the neural signaling of the whole artificial brain in real time. That is, 25 neural signals per neuron per second. Today's PCs can signal tens of thousands of modules in real time. The whole approach that I call brain building on the cheap costs under $2,000, so I'm hoping the idea will spread to other universities and research labs. Of course, my approach will be a lot more persuasive to my colleagues and funders if I can actually build such a brain in the next few years and show it controlling a robot to perform useful tasks. That's it. That's the end of chapter 2, entitled The Author and His Work. So